So that probably makes a lot more sense to some of my colleagues that are here that I wanted to be a judge as a child. So, but anyway, thank you, Lauren, and it's great to be here. For those of you, well, I wanted to kind of ask for a show of hands just because I'm sort of curious. So how many of you in this room are from a publisher or content producing company? Show of hands. And then how many of those have some sort of either paywall or model where you're charging consumers for access to your content? Okay, good. So, for those of you who don't know Piano, just a couple minutes on who we are. We essentially help content producers charge for their content. And Piano is actually the combination of Piano Media in Europe and then Press Plus in the US. And we have over 70 publishing companies that we're working with and help those publishers with our software is on over 600 different websites. So I'm going to take the bold move as the first of the last three people you're going to hear that stand between you and drinks to put up a very text-heavy slide. But it's one that I thought that was important because I think it makes a really important point about the use of data and analytics and sort of where we can focus that as content producers. And the thing I liked about this, and I think I would just substitute the word content producers for newsroom because this was a quote from somebody at the New York Times, but I actually think it applies to all content producers. And the point he's making is really, with analytics, shouldn't we strive for something more than just quantity? And can't we use that actually to improve the quality of the experience for some of our core users and actually create more core users through that process? And so the question I ask is, are we entering the age of engagement? And part of what I want to talk to you about is some of what we've learned at Piano from working with our clients about engagement and the importance of engagement in the context of charging consumers for content, which is somewhat obvious, but then also how we see publishers actually taking and using the insights that they have about their audience to improve their paywall performance or to actually develop additional new paid products, which I think is great and is really exciting. So one of the things that makes Piano maybe different from some other companies that offer solutions in this space is we actually do a lot of work with our clients after they've launched the paywall to try to help them optimize and maximize the revenue. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about this, which is a purchase funnel. And the thing I thought that was interesting is while you hear lots of talk about things like conversion rates or the price that people charge, engagement actually figures pretty prominently in the equation of maximizing digital subscription revenue. Both at the top of the funnel in terms of what that pool of loyal users are, active users that you have to monetize, but also once you've acquired the subscriber, it's really, I think the important thing is to make sure that they're staying engaged with your content. So I have 4 data slides, and then I have 3 sort of mini case studies to share with you. So there's a few questions I think that are key around this topic of engagement. And the data I'm showing provides a little bit of insight about how some different groups, and this is all kind of aggregate data for the most part, how publishers are doing on some of these. So this first one is average page views per unique user per month. And the thing that I think is really striking is, and this is a group of 300 regional websites, newspaper websites. So part of what is striking to me about this is, and these are sort of percentiles, so the top 95% of those websites, what they were seeing in terms of average page views down to the bottom 5%. But across this group that we looked at, they were averaging 3 page views per visitor per month. But as we know, averages are dangerous. Mark Twain said there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. So actually, if we dig a little deeper and look at it another way, this is actually looking and saying, okay, let's not think about it in terms of page views. Let's think about it in terms of article views, or a user actually coming and viewing a discrete piece of content. Because it tends to be the case if you're operating a paywall that usually your homepage or section fronts or things that are collections of content are outside the paywall. And this is a different set of data, but the thing that I think was striking about this, that for this group, 60% of the users weren't reading any articles. They're coming, they're seeing the homepage, they're coming, they're seeing maybe a section front, and they're going away. And what this is across the bottom is the number of articles. So, for instance, 40% of the traffic or the users were seeing 1 or more article. The implication that the 60% were people that were coming and not reading any articles. And the thing that's interesting about the metered paywall, and that tends to be the most popular version of the paywall that we see across our client base, is that it really focuses in on monetizing that loyal group who are viewing, who are more out at this end, viewing 7 or more articles, 10 or more articles a month. And you can see that's a relatively small percentage of the audience. So another question is, so we're talking about page views and article views. So what's the relationship between page views per user and conversion? And this is a little bit artificial because if you think about it the way a metered paywall works, it somewhat depends on where you have your meter set in terms of kind of what level where people would end up kind of converting, because at some point you're asking them to pay. But I think the thing that is clear is they're not even going to hit the paywall and be asked to pay if they're not a fairly engaged user, which again, back to the marketing funnel, why you really want to focus on thinking about engagement as a key component of your paid content strategy. Another key question, and this is virtually impossible to read, so you don't need to look at this, you can just, the point that I wanted to make, and this is something that I'm excited about because I think it's something that a lot of publishers aren't yet thinking about in a detailed way, but I think it has huge potential, both in terms of decisions that you make about how you're investing the resources you're putting into creating content, but also it has implications for potential new products you might want to launch. And I have one of my mini case studies is on this issue. So what this is, and this is something that we include in one of our analyses we do for clients or prospective clients, this is looking and saying, for different topics, how often is that topic appearing in your body of content, and how does that compare to how frequently people are coming and looking at that topic? You know, the idea is if for topics that are above the line, those are topics that are actually quite popular among the audience. And when you're thinking about investment in content production and how those resources are allocated, it's worth understanding this in terms of what kinds of topics are actually resonating and creating up more engagement with the audience. So, transitioning from this to how this can actually be applied, I'm just going to call this Site X, although Site X is a site that I have a lot of fondness for, given my past. So this is one of the first of the 3 mini case studies. So this is a global news site, and the challenge that they have is they actually have so much content across such a wide variety of topics that what they were finding is it's difficult to figure out what content to tee up for different types of users. And then to also make their marketing offers sort of specific and relevant. And part of what they've done is use content recommendations to help with this, to figure out, of all the content they have for a specific user, what's the right content to tee up to increase engagement and ultimately have people potentially hit the paywall sooner, and to have had a more relevant experience on the site and see more value and therefore be more likely to convert. And I think they're still in the process of kind of exploring and working through this, but I think they've been excited about the early results, because part of this is they've seen a 5-time increase in click-through on the targeted campaigns they've done using the content recommendations. So I think it sort of shows the power of being able to understand what a user wants and provide more of that so they have that engaging experience. This next one is the Canadian publisher Globe and Mail. And I thought this was actually a really interesting use of data and analytics and understanding what really resonates with their paid users. And what they found is the data that they had showed that 70% of subscribers, people that actually convert, site visitors that convert and become subscribers, actually did so when they were reading a financial or business story. And so this prompted them to do 2 things. One, they've actually invested more in that area of content and shifted some existing resources from other topics to that. But then they also launched a premium product on top of or beyond the sort of standard subscription to their website and have had great success. So I think this to me is an area that there's a lot that can be done to mine this data and really understand among people that are willing to pay for content, what content is it that they value, and are there opportunities then to either develop more to make the product richer, the core product, or have premium products that sit alongside the main product. And then this is one of my favorites for many reasons, and I find that even though most people haven't heard of Týden, that they're great for a lot of different reasons. So this is a Slovak weekly news magazine and website. And part of what I love about this is they kind of buck conventional wisdom that a weekly news magazine might not work well in terms of digital and not in terms of paid content. And they're actually one of our best performing in terms of the rate that they've achieved in terms of converting their visitors to paying subscribers. That doesn't necessarily mean they have more subscribers, but just the rate, the proportion of their visitors that they've converted. But the other thing that they did that was interesting was they've actually thought about how do they extend and make their content and the product offering digitally richer. And what they've done is, and they, I think, stumbled across this a bit, there was a documentary, an independent documentary film in Slovakia that was having difficulty achieving distribution. And they actually put it on their website because they saw kind of synergy and commonality between the topic of the documentary film and the sort of topics that people associate with the Týden brand. And what they found was they actually added a lot of subscribers because they did that, so much so that they decided to actually add a section to their site where they regularly now include independent documentary films. And to me, this is, I think, another trend that we'll start to see more of is publishers that have launched paywalls starting to think beyond their own existing content set and to think about how can they potentially include other people's content, other content producers' content that's relevant to their audience to make their offering richer. Another great example of this is actually what The Sun in the UK has done. I mean, again, conventional wisdom is a tabloid newspaper won't monetize well digitally. And what they did was secure soccer, football rights, video rights, and were able to include those video clips as part of the product, very consistent with their brand, and I think it really has helped them generate a lot more digital subscribers. So I think this is an area where we're going to start seeing a lot more efforts on the part of publishers to really think beyond their existing content assets as they develop their product. And I would just leave you with a few thoughts about digital subscription content. One thing I would say is it's very early days. If you think about how long most sites have been selling digital advertising, I mean, it's effectively been 20 years. Yet, the New York Times, I think, launched their paywall maybe 4 years ago. And a lot of publishers have only been charging and asking their visitors to pay for access for maybe 2 or 3 years. So we're very, very early in the journey on this. The second point I would make, and I say to a lot of publishers, is for that reason, because that digital ad revenue stream has existed for quite a while, that most sites are heavily, heavily optimized for digital advertising, and yet I think not as much thought has necessarily been put into evolving those sites to work for paid content, and to think through both the structure of the site, the content on the site, and really say, is this an experience that users are going to be willing to pay for? So I think that there's almost a rebalancing that needs to happen as a part of that process, so that there can be this additional healthy revenue stream in addition to digital advertising. And finally, and hopefully this is what you'll take away from my presentation today, is there's also a real opportunity to understand not just the audience overall, but that group of paying users, what they're doing, and how the product can be made to work better, both for those people that have paid, but also for that group that maybe are just on the cusp of consuming enough content. I mean, there's certainly an audience or a segment of most sites' audience that are very casual or infrequent visitors. But I think that there's another segment that kind of, like I said, is right on the cusp, and I think can certainly be nurtured, and I think is where a lot of publishers, especially those that have had a paywall for a while, will look to source the new subscribers going forward. So I think it's about understanding the audience, but then also, as these other publishers that I've mentioned have done, really acting on that data. And I firmly believe, and I guess this would be my prediction, and I'm not going to be bold enough to say when it will happen, but to me, it stands to reason that given the flexibility that digital allows us as publishers to have, and I put myself in that bucket because I spent 15 years working in publishing before coming over to Piano, and now as a vendor working with publishers. But the flexibility that digital enables in terms of what the product is, how relevant it can be made for the visitor, and just the lack of some of the limitations that exist with offline products. So I firmly believe that at some point we will look back and that it will be the case that the consumer revenue generated from digital products actually is greater than the consumer revenue that is generated from offline products. So I will leave you with that thought.